Hello world, and welcome back to another episode of Evergreen Secrets. It is 2 days before Halloween, so I thought this would be a good time to create a video for you. Hopefully I'll be able to get this up later tonight, and then you'll have a chance to take a look at it before Samhain. So super excited for the witchiest time of the year. It's a really super fun time for me because I get really introspective, and so there are a lot of things that kind of happen around this time of year. Obviously, from a kind of old world perspective, the harvests are pretty much done. Everyone's kind of put away what they need to for the year, and they're kind of bearing down for the winter. And so it's a time to really reflect on what you have, what you need, and kind of where you're at. And this is something that I really like to do this time of year. So I have a couple different things planned for myself for Samhain, including taking my kids out for trick or treats. So it's going to be a really busy day. I'm super excited. So for this episode, what I wanted to do was kind of reflect a little bit more on the more self introspection things that you can do during Samhain. So there are really kind of two different things that people really do this time of the year. One is to do kind of the spookier look at, talking to ghosts. People bring out their Ouija boards and see what they can do, because that veil between the living and the dead is at its thinnest point this time of the year. And that can be a really positive thing, especially if you have some issues that you need to deal with a loved one or with your ancestors. It's a really good time of the year to take a look at that. And in previous years, I think I've kind of gone through most of that. So this year, I don't think I'm going to be spending a lot of time talking with my ancestors or my loved ones who've passed. I feel like we've kind of gotten to a point where they're with me when I need them, not just during this time of the year. So for me, that's not going to be my focus this year. It has been in the past for sure. I have had some dear ones pass, and so it took a little while to get through that, and as it should, right? That whole process is definitely there for a reason. It's for you to grow and to heal. So what I'm going to focus on for this video is going to be some tools you can use for introspection. So the first thing that I wanted to cover is a little bit about rune casting. So runes is one of the things that I like to do pretty frequently. I've been meaning to get back to it. It's definitely there's always this saying that that the heathen ways are the only spirituality with homework, and I think that's definitely true. All of the books tend to be very academic in nature once you get beyond the surface. And one of the things that they don't really talk about in a lot of those books, especially the beginner books, is they talk about, oh, and you cast your runes. Well, what does that really mean? I mean, do you take them and throw them out onto a board? Do you select them out of a bag? There are different ways that you can do that, and I wanted to show you 3 of the different ways that I've used, and then you can try them out for yourself and see what works. The other thing that I wanted to show you for today is a spread that I've developed, and I've used it with really good success, both for myself and for others. And it's a good way to kind of get a snapshot of where you're at right now, both from an external view and then also on that internal side, like how are things really looking? How am I really feeling on the inside? And it's a good spread, I think, for kind of getting that complete holistic view of yourself as a person, and then you can kind of go from there on what you want to do with that information. So I'm going to go ahead and set up the table, and we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so here we are at the table. Before we get started, I do want to point out that I do have a rune cloth down. I do recommend getting one of those if you haven't already, depending on what type of runes you have. If you have wood runes, then there's going to be some oil or varnish that might come off on a table or might get chipped. If you're using rocks, then you might have a little bit of dust that's available there, or if you have clay, of course, there can be some dust that comes off, and you can actually see some of the dust from some of my clay runes here as well. Also, if you're using either stone or rock runes, you don't want to have that hitting a table. You're going to either chip the table or you're going to chip something on your runes. So get a nice rune cloth. I definitely recommend a natural material. So either cotton or wool or hemp actually is a really good material for this. You want to use something that's natural, that's going to breathe. And I found this at a fabric store in the remnant aisle. This is just some nice cotton here. I liked the nice blank canvas. There are some interesting ones that you can buy that have designs in the background that can actually be really useful for casting. One of the common ones that you'll see is a Valknut symbol, and it's 3 triangles that are all kind of interlocked, and that's a really powerful symbol within the heathen tradition that represents the 9 worlds, and so you can do some really interesting things with your rune casts by having that background. Another thing that you can have is if you have something that has the wheel of the year, or you could use the wheel of astrology, and then you can use that as kind of the background for your readings. So let's talk a little bit about how to cast your runes. So this is my set of runes that I've made here. We should probably have another video at some point about how to create some runes. So I prefer wood. I like the kind of transientness of woods. It's not quite as permanent, and so there are different ways that you can create these, and so these are just some that I've burned myself. So we'll have another video about that sometime in the future. So let's talk a little bit about how to cast the runes. So we've got our surface here, and so probably if you are familiar with tarot, you're very familiar with the idea of shuffling your cards, dealing them out, and then having a spread. So you would have different positions where you're going to want all of your cards. You can use that with runes pretty easily. And if you're familiar with tarot and that's something that you feel comfortable with, then that's a good place to start. So to do that, probably the easiest way is you can just take the rune directly out of the bag and then put together, for example, your reading. So if I had my 3, past, present, future would be one, and so you can just take them out as you do. As you put your hand in the bag, you can actually select which ones feel right. So that's one way that you can do that. Another way is actually one that I actually saw another rune practitioner use, is you can actually just take and keep all of your runes face down, so you're not able to see what the symbols are, and then you can kind of move them around and shuffle them up just like you would a deck of cards, and then you can go through and select which runes are for your reading. So you can kind of do it that way. Now, if you want to go a little bit more of the traditional route, if you think about casting the runes, that sounds a whole lot like throwing the bones, which is kind of a hoodoo tradition type of thing. What you can do is, again, kind of keep things in your bag. These ones are a little large, so usually you'll have runes that are a little bit less cumbersome. These ones are a little bit high profile here, but I like how visible they are. And I spent a lot of time creating them, so we've got a lot of good energy together. So kind of an interesting thing that you can do once you've gotten a little bit away from the spread idea. So if you either have that kind of a background symbol that you want to be able to translate the runes against, like the astrological wheel or the wheel of the year or something like that, then what you can do is actually take the runes and just take however many feels right to you. Usually you want to do somewhere in the realm of, say, 3 to 7 in your hand, and then you can actually just drop them. and see how they fall. And the interesting thing that you can do here is you'll see that that they're going to point in every single direction, right? So you can kind of see like, okay, this isn't exactly upside down for Wunyo here, but it's a little bit, it's still pointed in that downward direction. And so so you can kind of use that as another layer of your reading. You can also take a look at the runes that are upside down, and meaning face down, right? And so that can be what's called Merkstave, which is kind of the dark side of the rune. So you can kind of take that, and it's kind of like the reversals in tarot. So so having a rune that's upside down here, so like with Wunyo here, it's upside down. It's so kind of more towards your traditional kind of the almost the opposite side of things, the way that you would read a tarot reversal. But when you're talking about Merkstave, those are things where the energy is hidden, or that there's something that's missing or cloudy. So so it's something that's a little bit, it gives that extra layer into your reading. So those are kind of the three ways that you can cast your runes. You can select them and use a tarot spread. You can move them around on the table and select them, or you can just literally just drop them on the table. Definitely get used to the dropping thing if you're going to be using that method. If you get too many and you drop them too high, you're going to wind up with them everywhere. So just like I bumped the camera there, it's going to be everywhere. You're going to have a big mess. So so definitely practice with your particular set, depending on whether you have if you have some kind of oddly shaped stone runes, they can wind up bouncing a little bit. So these ones, and again, this is why having a cloth background is going to help. It's going to kind of prevent that bouncing around and, you know, things flying on the floor and things like that. So you'll definitely want to practice with that. So let's move on to an interesting spread that I've created. And so, so this is something that I created for myself, wanting to find some kind of insight into where I'm at and how I'm presenting myself both internally and externally. And so this is a 5-card or a 5-rune spread. So depending on whether this is something that'll work both for runes and for tarot. And so it's just 5 cards or 5 runes, and it's a pretty standard layout. So as far as the technicalities of it, it's fairly straightforward. So the first one that you'll have is going to be right in the middle, and then you'll have ones in all 4 corners. So just like the 5 on a dice, right? So if you're throwing a dice, so that would be like the number 5 there. And so the way that this spread works is the middle item, so the middle rune or the middle card, is going to be kind of the heart of your focus and your question, if you have one. This is a really good one for if you don't have a specific question. This can help you kind of guide that discussion yourself. So so this middle, the first rune or card, is going to be kind of the core of the discussion, the core of the reading itself. So then the rest of the reading is kind of divided up into quadrants. So this is kind of where you're at right now. And so anything that's on the left side are energies that are on their way out. So so it's kind of meant to be recent past type of an idea. So these are energies that are slowly on their way out, whether it be a few days or even within that day, those energies that are on their way out of your life. And then everything on the right-hand side is going to be energies that are starting to become. So this is kind of the future direction and how things are looking. This is kind of the forecast side of things. And so I don't believe that your future is set in stone. I'm probably going to say that a zillion times on this channel, but they're, you know, based on the patterns that you have, based on the decisions that you generally tend to make, you can kind of get an idea of what your reactions are going to be within your certain circumstance. And so basically that those energies that are coming to your life, that future look is, if everything stays the same today, this is kind of where things are headed, right? It's the GPS view of, okay, if you keep going down this street, you're going to go to this location. You can always change that, but you can see kind of where things are headed there on that right hand side. Then it's also split into top and bottom areas. So the top area are ways that you are expressing yourself externally. So these are things that that people outside of yourself can see and understand. And I don't know about you, but I present myself very differently in different circumstances. Obviously, at work, I present myself differently than when I'm playing with my kids or hanging out with my friends. You adjust yourself based on the context of where you're at in life. And sometimes we find, at least for myself, that you are expressing yourself in a way that is not at all representative of your internal self. And so this was a really useful spread for me to kind of see how other people are seeing how I'm presenting myself in the world versus what I'm actually feeling and expressing internally. And sometimes I forget to express internally. I'm just feeling it, and that's kind of a different type of a view of it. So being able to take that past versus the coming up type of energies versus how you're expressing yourself externally in the world, and how you're expressing yourself and what you're actually experiencing internally, you can kind of see some really interesting things. Because if you're seeing a lot of dichotomy, if you're seeing a real difference between what people are seeing versus what you're experiencing, then you'll know that those people who are around you, who may be able to support you in the things that you're experiencing internally, that that you need to actually express that in a way that they can support you. Because if you're showing the shiny figure of, oh, everything's wonderful and rosy and you're Susie Sunshine all the time, but inside you're just dying inside, you're going through a big crisis, then they're not going to be able to help. And it's not their fault because you're not communicating with them. So that's something that's really interesting. Now, of course, if your external and internal expression is very similar, then you can know that you're being very authentic in both your internal and your external expression, and that can be really helpful. So and then, of course, you can kind of see those energies that are going to be coming up. And then if you don't like what you see, you can change that. So if you see that you're going to wind up becoming if you're going to be a difficult person to live with, or if you're going to be grumpy or something like that, you can actually see that coming up in the cards or in the runes. And then you can be conscious of that, and you can make that decision to make a change if that's something that you want to do. Now, of course, if you want to be that grumpy person, then that's your prerogative as well, and that's perfectly valid. It's just a question of kind of what's actually coming up for you, and what you're going to experience, and then you can tie that all back to kind of where you're at today, and the focus for the reading as well. So this is a spread that I've done, again, for myself and for others, and it's been very interesting to kind of see the different ways that the different positions interact. And if you get a chance, give this spread a try and let me know what you think. Let me know if it's something that's useful for you, and I'm always willing to take a look and adjust, and then also if this is something that's useful, maybe we'll make up some more spreads and talk about them in the channel. So that's what I had for that today. Okay, so I hope that was useful for everyone. I hope you get a chance to do a reading or two, either with your tarot or with your runes, and kind of experience the whole spirit of Halloween this year. And divination is definitely something that's very tied to this time of the year, and it can be a really powerful experience. So I hope that this information was useful for you. If it was, let me know, and I will see you next time.